For the past several weeks, we've started a sermon series called Storylines. And here's the idea, whether it's Shakespeare or we're watching a TV show like This Is Us, or we go to the movie theater, or read a book, or we're talking with a friend, there's certain stories in our life that trace all through the ages, all through ethnic background, all through our experiences. We have some shared stories. And today we're going to be talking about this idea of happily ever after. If this is your first time with us or first time in a while, I'm normally not the guy that gets to speak on Sunday mornings. My name's Chris. This is the church that me and my family call our church family. As well, during the week, I get to wear the hat of Sojourn Collegiate Ministries, and we're on college campuses in Rhode Island and also in Boston as well. And my family, I have a wife of almost 10 years, and we have two young girls. Jared, who normally teaches the lead minister here, is gone on vacation with his family. So I'm excited to share this last sermon with you guys of this series. And so happily ever after. That's something we talk about in our house quite often because we have Disney movies in our house. And so every Disney movie seems to have the same kind of thread that runs through it, right? They're a little bit different, but all of them have somewhat of the same theme, right? And so it starts with this blissful, perfect, whatever's going on life and fun music and everyone's smiling and things are just wonderful. They're good. But then all of a sudden, a tragedy happens or a conflict arises that has to be overcome. And so most of the movie is dealt with this pinnacle that happens, and usually the evil is overcome, and at the end of the movie, it's resolved, and things are set back and put back into place. The broken pieces are put back into place, and things are good again, and we have a happily ever after. And we kind of say, well, that's just a fairy tale. But not really. Come on. We do the same thing in our own lives. So when we walk down the aisle, when we get married, we hope for the best and hope for a happily ever after. When we accept that new job that we're excited about, we hope for a happily ever after. When we buy that house, we don't think that it's going to fall apart, and we hope for a happily ever after. I work with college students. When a college student enters college, they hope for the best. They hope for a happily ever after. And when they graduate, they expect a job, right? Because they hope for a happily ever after. No matter what our background is, we all reach for the same fairy tale in our lives. And why is that? Why do we have the same thread that runs through all of our lives? There's probably three different classes of people when we're talking about happily ever after this morning, right? So first, you are that person that's on their best day, right? Everything's going perfect and you have all this hope, and the happily ever after is a reality for you. You say, no, things are great. I just got married, I just got a job, I got a promotion, I bought a house, whatever. Things are awesome, and I have hope that the future is going to be great. The second type of person, might be you, is like, things are awful. You're on your worst day right now. Relationship has just fallen apart. A marriage has just ended or is in the midst of that, and you haven't even told anyone yet. You're that close to losing your job, or maybe you just did lose your job and you have no idea how you're going to provide for your family. You feel up to here with trying to raise kids, and it's just all a mess and trying to figure out what that looks like. You're just graduated college last year, and you're still living with your parents. Actually, it was 3 years ago, but you're still living with your parents, expecting your first big job, right? Like, it may be your worst day ever, and you don't see hope, period. The third type of person, which I'm guessing this is most of us, so we're not having our best day, but we're also not having our worst day. We're just having a normal day, right? We have one of those days where we wake up, we get in our routine, we do what we want to do, we head to do all the things that we normally do on a Sunday, and we hope for the best. We just hope for things to be good. But no matter who we are, we all want this happily ever after. We want an ending that is put back together. I was really reminded this last week on all of us, right? With so many tragedies that are surrounding us. A lot of us, either we were still up or we woke up to the news last Monday that there was a mass shooting. And when we think of that, we say, we just want to be able to fix that. We want to be able to go in and mend all the broken pieces. When I was a kid, I wanted to fix things too, especially when I got the new Lego set for Christmas. I got the new Lego set, and it came in all these pieces, and what did I want to do? I wanted to make it right. I wanted to make it new. I wanted to make it built like how it was meant to be built. And we do that in our lives all around us. When we see brokenness, we want it to come back together and to be whole and to be complete. And the question for you and I really have to wrestle through is, why is that? Why do we want to fix things? Why do we want to put everything back into the way that it was meant to be? The Christian narrative rewinds all the way back to our origins to answer that question. But no matter what your faith background is, no matter what your experience is, no matter what generation you grew up in, no matter where you've lived or the experiences that you've had across your life, we all share the same idea that we want to fix things. We want to bring things back together. So we have to wrestle with that question. Why is that? The Christian perspective answers that in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 1, see, it's a poem. It's written just like a Robert Frost poem or Shel Silverstein or any great poet that's out there. It's supposed to well up this emotion in us, right? And so, have you ever been standing on a beach before watching the sunrise? What does it do to you? It brings out this awe-inspiring emotion. Or maybe you're in the pitch black at night and there's no clouds in the sky, and you see this expanse of stars and how beautiful and bright and wonderful everything is, and it brings you into this place of awe. Or after you've caught your breath after hiking up a mountain, you look out over the mountain and you see this huge expanse, and you say, wow. Genesis 1 is one of those moments. It brings you into this moment where this emotion's supposed to well up in you. And I want to ask you this question. While I read this, I'm going to read through day 1 through 6. And can you see the completion happening? It's organized. It's supposed to remind us that everything is brought back into completion. And so we're going to be in Genesis chapter 1 to start. Verse 3 says this, "And God said, 'Let there be light.' And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day." He continues on in verse 6. "And God said, 'Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water.' So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening, and there was morning the second day." Continues, day 3, verse 9. "And God said, 'Let the water under the sky be gathered into one place, and let the dry ground appear.' And it was so." And then skipping down to verse 11. "Then God said, 'Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds.' And it was so." Do you see the completion yet? Verse 16 says this, day 4 now, we're on day 4. "God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made all of the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light to the earth." Day 5 and verse 20. "God said, 'Let the water teem with living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth, the vault of the sky.'" Verse 24, day 6. "And God said, 'Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and all the wild animals according to its kind.' And so it was so." Did you guys see it? Did you see the completion happen? Let me show you a little bit better. So we're going to be up on the screen. So day 1, he creates light and darkness. He creates the space. Day 2, he creates sky and water. Again, a space. Day 3, he creates land and vegetation. And then day 4 through 6, he fills the space, the void. Day 4, he creates the sun, the moon, and the stars to fill the light and the darkness. Day 5, he creates birds and fish to fill the sky and the water. And day 6, he creates animals and humans to fill the land and the vegetation. Here's the reality, that from our very beginning, And we can look, that's why I love science so much, right? And so if you're into science, the reality is you get to see a piece of God every single day and the organization of how everything works perfectly together, this completion, this wholeness, the way that things were meant to be. And so us reaching out for this completion is an echo of our DNA. It's how God created us. He created us to find things complete. And so when we see things that are broken, what's our first instinct? Is to make them come back together. And so that scene from Genesis 1, where as a poem, it's written to remind us that everything is supposed to work together. It's an echo of the way that things once were. But at the same time, we have to ask the question, well, what does that mean for you and me in this happily ever after that doesn't really exist here on earth? Because I know that's not my reality that I see around us, that everything is perfectly put together. Does God condemn this idea of a happily ever after? Does it not exist? What does it look like? And so in 1 Peter chapter 1, a little context, Peter is talking to a group of people, most likely Gentiles, or in other words, they weren't Jewish heritage. They didn't come from a Jewish background. So they had no foundation to have a relationship with God. Okay? And so they're invited into this relationship with Jesus. And at that point, they're being pulled in every direction because they're being persecuted. They're being thrown into prison and they're losing faith. And so Peter comes and talks to them and says, hold firm to what you have first believed and what you first heard. And so he's speaking to this group of people that are in the midst of this chaos, kind of like our world today. And in verse 8, he says this, though you have not seen Jesus, you love him. And even though you don't see Jesus now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith. Listen to this part. The salvation of your souls. And so what Peter reminds everyone is that you have a reward coming. That your existence isn't just tied up into what you're experiencing right now. Your existence is so much bigger and so much grander than just right now. It's kind of like Google Maps, right? So if you've ever been on Google Maps before, there's this really creepy function called Street View. So you can check out your neighbor's car and their roof and everything that it used to look like. And so you can literally drive down a street that you don't live on, right? And so you can check everything out. It's really neat because you can see a bunch of houses, but at the same time, it's a little bit creepy as well. But that's where we live. We live on Street View. We can see everything right in front of us. We can see what's happening right in front of us. But if you and I were going to go take a trip to California, what would we do? Would it be helpful to be on Street View? Not really, right? We need to have the entire picture of what things look like. And so we would zoom out, and we'd be able to see the entire journey from a bird's eye view, from 30,000-foot view, right? So we could see starting here in East Providence, and we go all the way to California, and we could see the entire expanse that's laid out in front of us. See, you and I, we can see just what's in front of us. But just like when we take a trip and we want to know how many miles and how many hours and what cities we're going to be going through and where we need to stop and all of those things, God sees our entire existence. It's kind of like this as well, and maybe you've seen this illustration before. Imagine this rope that goes on forever. It doesn't. It just goes right back there. But imagine this entire rope is your existence. This is who you are. And the Christian narrative simply says this. The Christian narrative says, you're eternal. That what we experience right now, that's just the beginning. That's not everything. And so this is us that goes on forever and ever and ever. It just keeps going on. This is your existence. And at the same time, where are you at in your existence right now? Where do we find ourselves in our existence? In just this tiny little piece where the tape is right here. This is you and I. That's our existence. That's our experience right now. This is our entire existence. And so like I said, I work with college students all the time. And if you have a college student, if you know a college student, if you were once a college student or at least that age, you know that they're good for one thing. Questions, right? They don't take things for granted. And so when I tell them When we have this conversation about, wow, your existence is so long and this is going to be heaven and you can have everything that's brought back together and that's your reward. I say, really? Like, I don't feel it right now because right now I feel this part right here. And this is the reminder that we need that your existence is way bigger than right now. It's not a cop-out. It's reality. And so here's the big idea for today. A lot of times we're looking for hope. We're hopeful for hope. And hopefully it's out there. Hopefully we have a happily ever after. Hopefully we have a good ending. Hopefully we have a great marriage. Hopefully we have a great job that we love and a house that the roof doesn't blow off. And I hope that our retirement account is big enough for us so we can retire. We have a lot of hopes. We hope that things are good. But in just a split second, everything can change. And we're reminded that every single day with tragedy that surrounds us. And so in Jesus, we have a hope that's not just merely hopeful. It's secure. This hope isn't something that lasts forever. It's not just hopeful. It's secure in what we have. I believe that there's different parts of the Christian faith that you can put into practice. And when you put them into practice, you can experience life, right? I think about relationships, right? I can sit here and talk about Christian marriage and what that looks like, and you can put that into practice even if you don't believe in the death, resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? And you put that into practice and you can have a better marriage. At the same time, I could talk about how God talks about money and what those things look like, and practically you can have more security and you can handle finances even better than what you do today, right? You can talk about parenting. You can talk about relationships. You can talk about forgiveness. All of those things. It's like you can experience the power of the gospel, but you don't really believe the gospel message yet. What I mean by the gospel is the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ and placing your firm foundation in him. But then there's other things that you can't experience until you place your foundation in Jesus. And as much as I want to say that I can offer this practical advice for everyone, no matter where your foundation is, this is only available to those that say that Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And so the reality is, if you're exploring, I want you to peek in to saying, this is a perspective that changes everything. And so you're saying, believing in Jesus, what does that do for my life? This perspective changes everything. So I want to share three things, three shifts that happen in your life when you say that I believe in Jesus and that hope is not just hopeful, but it's secure in heaven and a relationship with God forever. The first one is in Luke chapter 21. I took my bookmarks out last time. So Luke chapter 21. I told Jared that I wasn't going to preach on end times. So this is an end times passage, and I'm not going to talk about it, okay? So if you have questions, just see Jared next week. But there's this reality. I want you to look at the difference. Jesus is talking in this part of his story, right? And he's sharing with a group of people that have questions about what does it look like when the earth is crumbling, when tragedy and chaos comes. It's partly about the experience that we're having now, because there's chaos that's always going to be around us and brokenness that's always around us. And there's two different groups of people and how they respond to that. And so I want you to hear the difference in response for those that have a hopeful hope and those that have a secure hope in Jesus. Verse 25. There will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and the tossing of the sea. People will faint with tear, apprehensive of what is coming on the world. And then skip down to 28. When things begin to take place, stand up, lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And so there's this huge difference. Those that have this hope that's secure in Jesus, that everything's crumbling around. And here, I want you to get this. This perspective and having faith in Jesus doesn't change what happens to you in life. But it changes how you experience it. It changes everything how you experience this world around you. And so there's one group of people is literally fainting from fear because everything around them is in chaos and turmoil around them. But at the same time, those who call Jesus their Lord and Savior, it says, stand up, lift up your head and your shoulders, be confident. And the reality is, he's inviting people to have no fear. And so the first shift that happens is we have no fear. We have no fear. So think about the worst thing that could ever happen to you. It's a really uplifting thought. Think about the worst thing that could happen to you. What comes to mind? Maybe it's this idea that you could lose everything financially in your life. Lose every dime. You could lose your house. You could lose your job. You lose absolutely everything in your life. If you have this perspective of happily ever after right now, you faint with fear. My goodness, what happens? When am I going to go? What am I going to do? But if you have this eternal perspective, it's okay. I've got friends around me. I can go live with somebody. We can figure things out. It's okay. Did you know over half the world lives literally with almost nothing? And so it's kind of odd that we have so much. Maybe at the same time you're thinking, man, what if somebody in my family becomes really ill and they die? It hurts. It's painful. Have you invited them to love and follow Jesus? What that looks like? Maybe it's your own life. As Paul says, who hung out with Jesus, as Paul says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Because he understood that it was just this little tiny piece of his entire life and existence. This life that we experience now is just a tiny piece of what things look like. And so he invites us to have no fear. That's the first shift that we can have. The second shift is from Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12, verse 12 says this: be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and mourn with those who mourn. Have you ever noticed that when tragedy strikes, people question their foundation? They show up to churches and they've never been to a church before. They ask spiritual questions and they've never asked spiritual questions before. We ask deep questions when we're surrounded by someone's last days. We start having conversations that maybe we just kind of ignore and just push to the outside in the peripheral of what happens. This last week when the Las Vegas shooting happened, where did people go? They prayed, they went to church, they held vigils, they asked deep questions. And so here's the reality. For us that would place our foundation in Jesus, we can be fully present with people because we have this 30,000-foot view that it's not just about the pain and the suffering right now. We can be fully present with people. And so that's the second shift. We can be fully present with people. And so people can come and ask questions, and we can sit with them and mourn with them. We can answer questions, but we can just be available and hang out. Because the reality is that's what people are looking for. They're looking for a foundation that's beyond the one that they're experiencing right now. The third shift happens, and it's a cool story. It's in Luke. And at this point, Jesus is telling a story. He's telling a story of the prodigal son. So this guy, he runs off, he takes all of his father's money. Maybe you've heard it before. And then he comes crawling back because life just hits him in the face and he can't survive. And so he comes back, and when he comes crawling back to his father, what does his father do? He celebrates. He celebrates. And so many times I've met so many people that aren't willing to celebrate because they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're just waiting for something bad to happen in their lives. That they can't be fully present in a moment of just celebration and enjoyment. And so this is what he says in verse 23. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and let's celebrate. For this son of mine who was dead is alive again. He was lost, but now he is found. So they began to celebrate together. So this last shift that happens when we place our hope in Jesus is we get to celebrate things around us. So the question comes back to this fairy tale, this happily ever after. Here's the cool part. God endorses this fairy tale because it's not a fairy tale. It's a reality. See, our happily ever after is secure in Jesus. It's a reality. It's not just hopeful. I hope that things end well. No, they do. We have our hope is set into that. It's anchored into that. It's a reality. And if we live like that, everything changes. Have you ever had a French fry without salt before? It's awful, right? It's like one of the worst things that but at the same time, you put a little bit of salt on it and it changes everything. It's all of a sudden the best food that you could ever eat. Not healthy, but it's good, right? Even if you think it's not healthy and you're like, I'm not going to touch a French fry. It's good. Come on. A couple of years ago, we took a spring break trip and we took a bunch of college students spelunking. Worst idea ever. It was like you had to dodge and weave. I thought people weren't going to be coming out, but we survived. But in the middle of this, we were in a cave. If you don't know what spelunking is, we were in a cave crawling and getting dirty, had a headlamp on. It was crazy. But in the cave, in the middle of it, our guide says, all right, everybody turn off your headlamps, right? And so everybody turns off your headlamps. And you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's crazy. It's absolutely wild. You can't see anything at all. And then one person gets really creeped out because they're claustrophobic. And then they turn on their cell phone. And then all of a sudden, what do? Every single person in there looks at that cell phone because it was attractive. The light was attractive. It's funny how Jesus picks up these two metaphors and said that's what the church is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be like salt, a salty French fry. And you're supposed to be like light. You're supposed to be like a cell phone in this nasty, dark cave that has no light. That people are supposed to be attracted to the way that we live. The reality is there is chaos and tragedy and heartache all around us. Every single day, there's a hurricane that's hitting the coast right now that's already killed dozens of people before it even got here. Puerto Rico is still rebuilding. And that doesn't even count what's happening in our own personal lives right now that we're not willing to even share with other people. Tragedy is here. But having this hope that is secure changes our perspective on everything. And the world needs to see that. So I want to invite you to be salt and light in the midst of this chaos. Because heaven's real. Let's act like it. Father, you're good. Jesus, you're the glue in our lives. You hold all things together. And for that, I'm so thankful. I'm thankful that I get to be a dad and a husband. I get to work. I get to do all these things. But in the midst of all the things I can't control, you hold it all together. Thank you for giving us a view and a perspective that's beyond the pain and the suffering. Thank you for inviting us into being part of this world and relationships. And Father, thank you for securing our hope in Jesus Christ, that we're not worth. But I thank you that you believe that we are. In Jesus' name, amen.